Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make wax sprinkles, a really cool double wick template, and also I'm going to show you how I store my fragrance oils so I never forget what I have in stock again.
Okay, so the first hack I'm going to show you guys is how to make sprinkles out of wax. So I posted these sprinkles on Instagram and you guys were really interested in how I made these. I have put sprinkles in my candles before, and I think a lot of candle makers can agree that sprinkles are pretty harmless in candles, but as my business grows and I sell more candles, I just want to decrease any extra liability. So I decided to go with wax sprinkles, and this is the Golden Wax Tart and Melt. And the reason I chose this is because it's made for candle melts and it's a pretty hard wax, and I think it's pretty good to work with for this situation. And what you will also need is going to be a piping bag, and this tip that is like super duper small. I'm not really sure the size of it, but it's probably the smallest tip you're going to find. And also parchment paper to put on your baking sheet, and just a little bit of dye. Now what I'm going to do is scoop some wax into a pour pitcher, and what you want to make sure is that you don't put a ton of wax, and this is going to be unscented also. You definitely don't need to waste any fragrance on doing this. So it really, the amount you use doesn't matter too much, as long as you don't put a whole bunch. So maybe 3 ounces. Let's see how much I actually put here. So I went with 5 ounces, so that is what I put here, and I'm going to go ahead and melt this on a double boiler. Alright, so I'm back and I added the yellow coloring to this soy wax also, and you're going to want to let this wax cool down, and I found that 113 degrees is the perfect temperature to get the consistency that you need to make the actual sprinkles. So here I am just going to prep my piping bag. So I actually found that using the coupler that comes that you can purchase for piping bags, it made it harder to pipe the wax, and you get a lot of wax stuck in that coupler. So I found that just putting the straight piping tip into the bag is the best way to do this. So that's what I'm doing here. Now I'm just going to start to line my baking sheet. So this is an important step if you don't want to have your wax stick. I'm pretty sure it won't stick to the baking sheet, but it makes it super duper easy to pipe the wax onto this paper. Now you can see here that the wax actually cooled to 108, and it's okay, but it was a little bit too cool for this step, and you'll see in just a second when I go to pipe that it doesn't make the best of straight lines. So getting it closer to 113 or 115 degrees, you're going to get a better consistency, and it's going to be almost like a custard consistency. That's kind of what you're looking for with this wax. So while I'm putting this into the piping bag, this probably seems like a lot of work when you can just put actual sprinkles on top, but like I said earlier, just reducing any liability. A lot of candle makers out there can agree that sprinkles are probably not going to do much harm in the candle, but let's keep it real. Candle accidents do happen. There's people out there that don't trim their wick, and there's people who are going to let their candle burn to the bottom, and your business could be held liable. Maybe your insurance company doesn't cover candles that have sprinkles in them or dried flowers. So that's something that I thought about before I start the holiday season, just making sure to eliminate any of these liabilities in case somebody out there has some crazy candle accident and tries to make my business liable. So if this feels like a lot of steps for you, maybe just try to eliminate sprinkles in your candles if this is something that you are worried about, if you don't want to go through the hassle of making the sprinkles. But here we go, I'm piping. So you can see it's kind of straight, and I'm really bad at piping straight, but if it's not completely straight, it's okay, because we are going to cut these up into little pieces. One thing I have to say is use a light hand. If your hand is too heavy, you're going to get some blobs onto your parchment paper. Yeah, so my lines are getting progressively worse as the wax dries down. So you can only do so many lines before your wax really does start to harden. That's why I advise that you don't fill up a piping bag. But since this is unscented, you can actually just squeeze this back in the container, heat it up for a little bit back to 113, and start over. Now that I'm done, pretty much done piping, what you want to do after this step is you're going to take your pan and put it into the freezer. And what I'm doing here is I'm just squirting the wax back into the container like I said, and then the pan is going to go into the freezer for just like 5 minutes or so to harden. Alright, so we're back from the freezer and this is how everything looks, and it's really sturdy, you guys, and it doesn't even melt like in my hands or anything. So if you were to use any type, I haven't tried this with regular container wax for soy, so I'm not sure if it's going to work the same for that kind of wax. But once you kind of have it all frozen, you're going to start cutting it into the sprinkles. So you can do the long sprinkles or short sprinkles, whatever you want to do. Alright, and here you can see I have my sprinkles, and they hold their shape really well. I've had some sprinkles in the container now for a week and they haven't changed or melted together or anything like that. I'm telling you, this type of wax hardens pretty good. So this time around, I actually got the wax to the temperature that it should have been, so you can see that it's easier for me to pipe it out. And yeah, so it just makes it a lot easier, and it's very hard to pipe a straight line. It's a lot harder than it looks. So I know this is tedious, so maybe take, block out some time every month or so to make a little thing of sprinkles. I don't put a ton of sprinkles on my candles, usually like 10. So if you were to take 2 hours and make some sprinkles, hopefully that will last you quite a while. So yeah. So to make your sprinkles a little bit flashier, you could put a small bit of glitter in here. So I just put a little bit of glitter into the sprinkles and then mixed it on up. And you can not add glitter, depends on whatever you're feeling like. So there you go, wax sprinkles.
Now I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a double wick template. This is really nice, especially when you're trying to wick a whole bunch of candles during the holidays.
So to make my template for double wicking, I decided to do it in the Cricut because the Cricut does have a grid. So you're going to need to do this with whatever program you have on your computer, or you have a grid, and measure out your container, the diameter, and also measure out the diameter of your wick tabs. Once you do that, I made sure to measure them really well and place them where they are so that the wicks are 1 inch apart from the center. So I know the wick tabs definitely look closer than 1 inch apart, but the actual wicks are 1 inch apart in that template. From there, I'm just going to go ahead and print it off in the Cricut, and yeah, that's pretty much why I use the Cricut. And make sure to do some contrasting colors because that's going to help you determine where the wick is going to go when it's easier to see when you're wicking a lot of containers at once. Once it's printed off, this is how my template looks from the Cricut, and the next step is optional. So I used cardstock, and that's a pretty sturdy paper, but I'm actually going to use a laminator. I think that, yeah, a laminate machine, laminator, whatever. It's gonna laminate the paper, and I will link this one down below. Obviously I got it from Amazon, and it's gonna make it nice and easy to work with and clean off when you're working with a whole bunch of wax. So here I am prepping the paper to be laminated, and I'm doing it with one hand because my 3-year-old wanted to be held when I was filming this video. So this is how it's going to look once everything is laminated. Now you could use the template just like this without doing the next step, but when you're doing a lot of containers, you're still going to have to sit there and line everything up and make sure that you don't move the container around when you are trying to wick your candle. So I went a step further and I'm actually going to make a little tube around that template so that I can easily wick a candle every time. So to make that tube, the first thing you're going to do is actually use the paper that you just laminated. And I'm actually going to cut long ways, because if you cut short ways, you might not have enough paper to wrap around your candle. So go ahead and cut long ways down your paper. Now you're going to have a strip like this, and you're going to want to measure this around your candle containers and make sure that it's not super tight, because it's going to be hard to pull out of the template. And if you have multiple containers, you can just print this template off and you know, make a whole bunch of different templates, but I just have one type of container. So once you've kind of gotten the measurement down, you just tape it. I found that using hot glue isn't super effective because you have to stand there with the glue and make sure it dries, so tape is a way better way to do this. And also, if you happen to make it too tight, you can always just take the tape off and try again. Now that we have the tube, you want to take your time to line it up with your template. So having the contrasting colors again is good for this step. Line it up, maybe put your container back in there so you can get a good look at everything. And once you have that lined up, then you're going to take out a hot glue gun to seal that tube down to the template. When you're doing this step, just make sure you're not moving your template around and take some time to get a good seal on that. I find that this is super sturdy and I haven't had any problems with it ripping off of the paper or the template with this method. When you've let everything dry, you can go ahead and take your container out of the tube and you're going to be left with something like this. And this is going to be your little wicking template, and I'm just sealing in the last bit. So with this template, I actually had a really good suction on, you know, the tube. So I made sure to go ahead and poke some holes at the bottom to let some air through, and it made it a lot easier to take the container out of the tube. Now here is how you would use it in action. I've been using this for about the past couple weeks and it has been amazing for double wicking. Before I was just eyeballing it, and if I'm going to be making a lot of candles this holiday season, I want to make sure everything about my candle is consistent across the board. I'm only human, so I'm trying to eliminate as many mistakes as possible and put systems in place so everything stays as consistent as possible. Another thing I really like about this template is if you need help this holiday season and family members want to chip in and help you wick a whole bunch of containers, you can easily just print another one of these off and make one really quick, and then you don't have to worry about having someone possibly mess up any wicking, especially with double wicks. It'll make it really easy for anyone to jump in and help you out with that. One thing I want to point out is my original template. You can see the tube is a lot shorter, and I actually found after using these two templates that the shorter tube is a lot easier to work with than the longer tube. So if you want to go ahead and cut your piece of paper shorter, you can go ahead and do that too. So I actually decided that I need to organize all of my fragrance. What was frequently happening was I was spending too much money on fragrances and I was buying a lot of repeats. It got to the point where I had 5 or 4 Jamaican Me Crazy fragrances, 2 from Candle Science and 2 from Nature's Garden, and I said, okay, this is getting ridiculous. I need to figure out how to organize these fragrances so I remember what I have. And so I've been using Crafty Base, and it has been amazing for helping me to keep everything organized. So one thing I decided to do was reorganize the fragrances, and I bought all of these containers and then I labeled them. So I had row A, row B, and row C, and on one of my walls I actually have the smaller fragrances as row D. From there I went ahead and organized and printed off a material list from Crafty Base. So this is the inventory worksheet that I printed from Crafty Base, and you can actually filter out certain materials. So in this instance, I just filtered out all the fragrance oils, so that's what it printed out for me. And it also lists the amounts that you should have left in stock. So as I was going through and organizing all of the fragrances into their new bins, I was giving them like a once over just to make sure that the amounts were pretty accurate. I usually like to keep dummy bottles, that's what I call them, but they're pretty much just empties, and I can easily tear my scale and then weigh, you know, the same type of bottle and get the exact amount of fragrance oil that's left in the bottle. And I like to use recipes in Crafty Base, so there's a feature where you can actually use recipes and keep accurate counts of everything. So every time I make a candle, Crafty Base is going to deduct all of the things that I used, and it's pretty handy. So anyway, here's me organizing all of the fragrance oil. And then once I did this, I went ahead and scanned the sheet over to my virtual assistant, and he went ahead and put all of the bins, he associated all of the bins to the fragrance oils, and if there was any corrections in the weight, he changed that. And also I was able to add any fragrances that might have got missed. So there were some that just never got documented into Crafty Base, so you went ahead and did that. So this has been a super helpful way for me to just be able to think of new designs, because I know exactly what I have in stock. So when I'm thinking of a new design, I can just go into Crafty Base, look at all of the fragrances, and then I can go locate the fragrance, smell it, and see if it's what kind of design I should make. So this has been such a lifesaver. And if you have a lot of fragrance oils like me, you might want to consider moving into Crafty Base and keeping inventory that way. Now, Crafty Base is a paid membership, so if you have a smaller inventory, you can just do this with a spreadsheet. If I didn't have many oils, I wouldn't find it necessary to have, you know, a monthly membership to Crafty Base, but a spreadsheet will do just fine also.
Thank you guys for checking out this video today. I hope you found it helpful, but until next time, bye guys.